I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, Democrats really don't care if rich people buy policy as long as it's the right kind of rich people.
I am rich.
Also coming up, the San Juan County Sheriff joins us to talk about his disappointment in a low sentence for a controlled substance homicide. Plus, King County prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion ahead of public safety. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here for our final live show of the week. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. A lot to get to, but I do want to focus on, again, what has been our top story throughout the week, because I want to make sure that we are dismantling some of the arguments, the disingenuous arguments that are being used to convince you not to consider signing initiatives that would do things like lower the price of gas, lower the amount of taxes being taken out of your paycheck, improve public safety by giving police the power to pursue dangerous criminals again, like they were able to before the craziness in 2020. Because the arguments that the Washington State Democratic Party, the ACLU of Washington, which continues to be mind-boggling to me, civil liberties, and groups like Fuse Washington, progressive groups, they continue to trot out these fear-mongering tactics, labeling, whatever they can do to try to get you to not sign these initiatives, don't even consider it, don't talk to tell your friends not to sign them, etc. But there's one that's really at the center of this that we're going to see them use with increased frequency to try to, once these initiatives wind up on the ballot, which I think a lot of them are going to, the legislature will just ignore them next year, and then they're going to go to voters. And when you put something in front of voters in even a blue state like Washington that gives them a chance to be taxed less, they're going to pass the thing. And Democrats know that, and that's why they're so freaked out about it. I mean, they're really in a full-blown meltdown, which I kind of love to see, because how many times are Democrats in Washington state on their heels? Not often. They are right now. But as this progresses, one of the arguments you're going to see more and more is a vilification of not the initiatives, but the person who's funding the initiatives. The fact that he has money, and that he's a scary, rich Republican. We've seen this now slowly starting to ramp up. A couple weeks ago, we talked on the show when the first initiative was turned in, which would eliminate the cap and trade program, so reduce prices at the pump. Shasti Conrad, the chair of the Washington State Democratic Party, what did she do? She came out, she tweeted that this is about buying policy. She said, I guess when you keep losing elections and you're do-nothing legislators, you try to buy policy. So again, it starts this suggestion that the only reason more than 400,000 Washingtonians would possibly want to lower gas prices is because they're being convinced to do it by a right-wing multi-millionaire who just wants to buy policy, never mind all the people who ended up signing it. This is also something we saw this week when the Washington State Democratic Party came out and they told people, not only decline to sign the initiatives, which is your right, but call a hotline and report the location of lawful signature gatherers so we can send people out to harass them. When they were talking about that, again, they brought up Brian Haywood, who is rich. Yeah, Brian Haywood has a lot of money. He's got millions of dollars. He spent a lot of his personal money on these initiative efforts. They sent it a tweet. Alongside Washington State's MAGA GOP, Brian Haywood, a right-wing millionaire, is responsible for funding these initiatives to avoid paying his share in taxes. So you're seeing that continue to ramp up. It'll become more and more about Brian Haywood because they know that making it about the subject of these initiatives isn't popular for them, because you're talking about lowering taxes. You're talking about saving money. So what can we do? Oh, how can we scare people? Oh, let's talk about this right-wing, MAGA extremist multimillionaire trying to buy policy. Except, hopefully people are smarter than that, because apparently the only time it's okay to buy policy is if you're buying policy that Democrats agree with. Back in 2018, when there was a gun control initiative that was heading to the November ballot, what did a couple rich billionaire, in fact, much richer than Brian Haywood, progressives do? Well, they spent $1 million apiece trying to what? Buy policy. This is the article from the Seattle Times at the time. Paul Allen, Nick Hanauer give $1 million each to Washington State initiative pushing new firearms regulations. And both of those people, Paul Allen, Nick Hanauer, the late Paul Allen and Nick Hanauer, far richer than Brian Haywood. I mean, he's got a lot of money, but he doesn't have Paul Allen, Nick Hanauer money. And don't take it from me. Take it from Nick Hanauer himself, who loves to go on TV and brag about just how filthy rich he is.
I'm a very well-paid guy.
Not like me, dude.
Wait.
Not like me.
Right now, I pay...
Stuart, you are not rich. I am rich. I am rich. I am rich. I am rich.
He's rich. Really rich. Filthy rich. And it's perfectly fine for him to spend his wealth on trying to, quote-unquote, buy policy. But when someone who's not a progressive billionaire does it, then it is just plain wrong. Hypocrisy at its finest. All right, a follow-up to a story we talked about a couple days ago on the show. It has to do with a crime called substance abuse, or not substance abuse, what is the name of the actual crime, Nicole? I did this controlled substance homicide. Wow, I just screwed that intro up. It has to do with a crime called controlled substance homicide. And what that means is if you have someone who dies of a drug overdose and you can prove who gave them those drugs, then that drug dealer is complicit in their death and can be held accountable in a court of law. It's a pretty rare case to prosecute because do you have evidence of where those drugs came from? You know, for people who are, for instance, using drugs out on the street, usually the answer is no to that. Even for, you know, some of these young people, and I've seen those more so be the cases that are pursued, you've got to have like a text or some sort of communication. And if the person who used the drugs died, you know, that might be the only link to finding out where they actually got the drugs from. But I think that the law itself is critical. I wish it were able to be used more often. These cases were pursued more often, because if you have that kind of accountability for drug dealers, where they can go to prison for homicide, for selling drugs to someone and those drugs kill them, I mean, to me, that is something that could possibly dissuade people from dealing drugs if it's used more and more often. Then if you can kind of continue to trace it back, okay, where did that person get the drugs? Where did they get the drugs? And then try to take down a whole chain, you can save countless lives. So that's why the sheriff of San Juan County was so angry earlier this week. He took to Facebook in a really lengthy post, just trying to explained to the people of his county what was going on. You know, he and his office, they investigated a controlled substance homicide. There was a death of a young person who took a drug that was laced with fentanyl. They died. We're able to trace it using cell records to someone, successfully prosecuted this person, only for a judge to give him a freaking slap on the wrist. We talked last week about sentencing guidelines and standard sentencing ranges, how you have judges, they can use their discretion kind of within the standard range and say, does this person deserve a low-end sentence or a high-end sentence? In some cases, I've seen judges give an exceptional sentence beyond the high end. But in this case, the judge actually went to the extent of using their discretion to give this drug dealer an exceptionally low sentence, below even the lowest end of the standard sentencing range, for providing a drug to a young person that took their life. And so we asked San Juan County Sheriff Eric Peter to come on the show and talk about not only his deep frustration with this case, but something that we discuss all the time on the show, which is this frustration, generally speaking, about policies related to public safety that just lack good old-fashioned common sense. Sheriff Eric Peter, welcome to Undivided.
Thanks, Brandi. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good, and I share your frustration about this case. First, before we get into some of the details, I mean, substance abuse homicide, that's a hard case to prove. I don't see those very often.
Yes, I think this is probably the first one I've seen since moving up to Washington State.
Yeah, why do you...
In our county.
Yeah. Why do you think that those cases are important for your office to pursue and to investigate?
Well, first and foremost, we need to get justice for the victims and their families. But we also need to try to track down the source of where this poison is coming from. I think everybody would agree fentanyl is not healthy. And we would like to know not just the person who handed the pill to that person, but where they're getting the pill from and where they're getting the drugs from. One person dying is too much. I know death's an inevitability, but not like this. And you definitely don't want to see more people dying from something that can be prevented.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, tracing where that drug came from, it helps prevent further loss of life. And so that's one of the critical parts in investigations like these. So talk about, because this was a pretty young person who died from this fentanyl, correct? Can you tell me a little bit about the facts of the case?
Yeah. When we received, now that it's all adjudicated, we can talk about it now. It's all public record. Deputies were dispatched to a medical call. Someone had an overdose. Young person, unfortunately was deceased. Our detectives were able to secure cell phone, secure a tablet, and throughout the investigation, we're able to identify the person that provided the drugs to this young person that passed away, and worked the case and ended up getting a warrant for the arrest for the controlled substance homicide.
Yeah, and by young, how young you talking?
I believe at the time of the incident, he was around 16.
Yeah. So when you guys are able to connect it, you make an arrest. Do you try to get information from the suspect about where he got the drug?
We did.
And?
And refused to talk to us.
Wow.
And the frustrating part is, I'm not debating whether it's this person or other people who have tragedies go on in their life where they had a bad upbringing, only had one parent or didn't have any parents or were unhoused. Those are all tragedies that, they have to work hard to overcome. But to listen to a defendant, any defendant, sit there in court and say, I'm so sorry this happened. But you refuse to cooperate and give the name of the person where they got the drugs from to help other people not be a victim and die. It just comes off disingenuous. Like, are you sorry, or are you sorry because now you got caught?
Yeah. So you took to Facebook and put a pretty lengthy post out to your fellow community members expressing your frustration with the end result in this case, which, factoring in possible good time, you could be talking about less than 2 years for this individual who contributed to the death of another person. Why did you feel so strongly about the outcome of this case?
I'm pushing 29 years now in law enforcement, and 22 of this in the fourth largest city in the nation. And I've seen my fair share of people dying, either from drug overdoses or from violence, senseless killings. And those never go away, especially when they're young people. I mean, these are images that stick in your head forever. And it's exhausting. And I'm not even the family affected by it. And I did my job for my whole career, being a good officer, being a good sergeant, following policy, not speaking up because it wasn't my place at that time. Sheriffs are elected to represent the people in their community and take care of public safety. And if you don't work in law enforcement, you don't work in the judicial system, and you don't know how it works, it's our job to tell people, hey, this is what's going on. Here's what the sentence could have been. Here's what it actually was. Because a lot of times people come back to law enforcement and say, why didn't you do anything? Well, we did do something. If you have time, I'm willing to sit here all day and explain the process to you. And in a smaller community, the deaths just seem to affect you more. You can't get lost in a big city or in a community like this, like you can in a big city. All deaths are tragic, but here, everybody in these tiny communities. at least on a basic level. And to see people die when life is short enough already, it's so frustrating and disheartening.
And just for the edification of our viewers, you mentioned that you spent most of your career in the fourth largest city in America. You came out here from Texas, right?
Yes, I worked for 22 years with Houston PD.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously there are some political differences between the two states, but as you note in your post, this really isn't about politics. And we had a case on the show that we've been covering for months about domestic violence homicide, where the guy who took a gun to his girlfriend's brain when she dumped him was looking at 10 years, which was just wild for the family. And you said something in this post that really struck us because we had just been sort of talking about that sentiment. And that is, I've been in law enforcement for 28 and a half years. I never thought I would live in a world where the rights of the persons convicted of a crime seemed to matter more than the rights of the victims and the law-abiding residents of San Juan County. What is to be done about that?
That's up to everybody in each community to make a decision. And where I'm coming from is not a left or right. Part of the reason I left Texas is I'm not far right and I'm not far left either. I think that is a major problem in our country as a whole. Too many people are divided. People talk about working together. Everybody stays on their own sides. I don't know why people can't take good ideas from both sides and just go down the middle on this and make some common sense decisions. Too many people nowadays are listening just to respond, to have that gotcha, aha moment, instead of listening to understand. And I'm passionate about talking about that because when I was a young cop, brought up in the era I was brought up in, I am embarrassed that I was the same way. And I effort every day not to be like that anymore. It's just frustrating seeing knee-jerk reactions to making decisions on our laws and not having a constructive down-the-middle conversation. Yeah. And even if they're well-intended changes, sometimes they're short-sighted and they have unintended consequences.
Yeah, you just basically gave a commercial for unDivided, by the way. I might have to use that as a commercial for the show.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I just, now that I'm in a position where I have a chance to say something, I feel like I'm doing a disservice if I don't stand up and say, and I know it sounds corny, why can't we all get along? Why can't we all just listen to understand and try to make some rational decisions?
Yeah. And as you said, these could be well-intended from the right place, changes to our judicial system. But if the outcome is clearly nonsensical, then there's no shame in reevaluating it. In this case, the work you guys put in to make the connection for a charge that, as I said, is not used very often because it's difficult to prove. Would you have felt differently about the outcome if this suspect had been willing to work with law enforcement to try to connect the dots and get more of these drugs off the street?
Somebody died. A young person died. And my belief is that that low end of the standard sentence was a very reasonable offer. I think below it is not going to hold him accountable. And I've heard defense attorneys over the years argue, well, prison isn't going to rehabilitate somebody. Prison is a scary place. Prison is, doesn't have the resources for substance use disorders or mental health disorders. So the option is to not send people? I'm confused on that. If we put them in there and don't have the resources, we fail them. If we don't put them in, now we failed everybody. So if the resources aren't there, there's money. I'm not arguing what our state, what our country spends money on, but how about investing in the people, not just the people who talk the loudest, not just the people who don't get put in prison, but how about invest in people? If those resources aren't there, how about we put the resources there? Put an effective substance use disorder treatment system in the prisons. Same with mental health. I'm a veteran too. I've met fellow veterans who have other other mental health issues and other injuries and end up with substance use disorder, they need the help too. I mean, put it in the system. Don't just throw your hands up and say, well, we're just gonna trust their word that they're gonna go to these treatments.
It's a good point. One I really haven't thought about, which is, you're right, that's the sort of, oh, well, prison's not going to help them. Okay, well, let's design prison in a way that will help them. And then it's the best of both worlds, right? Sheriff
Right.
Eric Peter, we do appreciate your time, and we appreciate you bringing the community's attention to this case, because I think it's important for people to know what's happening on the back end of our criminal justice system.
I do too. You know, people, like I said earlier, I could not go be a hospital administrator. I have no idea how to run a hospital. Someone has to explain it to me. And I spent enough years in my career not talking and not explaining things. And if we don't explain to people how law enforcement works, how investigations work, how our judicial system works, then we're doing ourselves and them a disservice. So
Couldn't agree more. All right, well, you're welcome back on anytime. Thank you so much.
thank you, Brandi. I'm very honored and grateful to have the opportunity to chat with y'all today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I like him. He's just right my cup of tea. It's, he had the Texas experience. He came up, he's having the Washington experience, which is obviously very different. And if we can't come together to improve public safety, then what are we doing? But I do appreciate the point he makes there at the end, which maybe I haven't talked about in the nuance that it perhaps deserves. But okay, for people who want to say, oh, the current state of our criminal justice system isn't helping anyone, incarcerating someone doesn't help them. Well, okay, then what are you doing wrong? If the idea is to put people behind bars and make sure you get the punishment aspect of it, which is real, you have to have punishments when you break the law. But you have that aspect of it. Okay, well, if you turn around and say, we need to do that, but while they're there, we want to make sure that when they get out, they don't recidivate. Well, what are you doing to make sure that that doesn't happen? What are you doing behind bars to make sure they get whatever? Maybe it's drug treatment, mental health treatment. So if our criminal justice system isn't rehabilitating people, then that's a you problem. You don't just let them out and say, well, okay, well, our criminal justice system sucks, so let's just all move on past that. Absolutely absurd. All right, coming up next, we'll get to our segment, Unbelievable. King County. Unbelievable with most of the things they do. But to prioritize skin color when it comes to keeping the community safe is so stupid, it's hard to even wrap my mind around it. Before we get there, I've been talking about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, down 37 pounds. I lost most of that in just 2 months. Last year, during November and December, probably the 2 hardest months to watch what you eat. I started a wellness journey and lost almost 30 pounds. And that's because the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program is designed to work with your life. The ups and downs, holidays, vacations, events. I mean, you cannot be perfect on a weight loss plan or it's not going to work. And that's why personally I've seen so many of them fail. But now I'm more than a year into this program. I feel great and I recommend it to everyone who wants to cut a little weight. Maybe like me, you gained some COVID weight and it just has not come off yet. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team at eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Ask him all the questions you've got before you fully commit to the program. And that's really part of it. Not every weight loss program is right for every person. So make sure you get those questions in. eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. All right. When it comes to public safety, the idea that we would need to spend extra time, extra energy recruiting people who want to be police officers, recruiting people who want to be firefighters, based on the skin color and the sex of the person who we want to come in and do the job is absolutely bananas to me. Let's get to it in our segment, Unfreaking Believable. Boop. Okay. So Seattle and King County Public Health, which I don't know why this is a King County public health issue. That's very confusing to me. They have a December 10th deadline coming up, so be advised, for registering for the King County Diversity and Recruitment Workshop. This is a Facebook post from Seattle King County Public Health. You don't want to miss this free opportunity to learn about the hiring process to become a firefighter and have a chance to work with mentors in the field. This workshop is open to everyone at least 16 years of age and is geared toward recruiting members of the BIPOC community. Women, LGBTQIA+, bilingual, or those with no prior fire service experience. For more info and to sign up, it gives a link. Here's the thing. The only one of those things that I care about is the bilingual aspect. I actually think being bilingual is a qualification, something that makes you more qualified for a job, or uniquely qualified for a job. Especially in first responder. I mean, you come up to a fire, if you've got someone, or it's an emergency situation, and you've got someone who doesn't speak English, that makes it a heck of a lot more difficult to help them. And so, yeah, I do think that it's important in the fire service, if you're in law enforcement, a first responder of any kind, I think having a second language is a really good qualification for a job. You know what's not a qualification for a job unless it's the head of the NAACP, as I've said previously? The pigmentation of your skin, what's going on in your pants, and who you choose to sleep with in the privacy of your own home. That, to me, is almost the dumbest one. Why would, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, why would that have anything to do with whether King County wants you to come be a firefighter at a time when nobody wants these freaking jobs? I mean, gosh, who'd want to be a firefighter in King County now when half the calls you go to are overdoses, or half the calls you go to, you got to wear a bulletproof vest because it's not even safe to be a firefighter, first responder when you're not even going to a fire? Absolute ridiculousness. And this just speaks to, it's similar to what I was saying about Bruce Harrell's DEI efforts to fill vacant storefronts downtown. Okay, you have blocks, literally blocks of empty storefronts. And you are going to be picky based on skin pigmentation of who you help, what businesses you help to fill those storefronts? You can't afford to be picky when it comes to small businesses coming into Seattle. You can't afford to be picky when it comes to, I mean, I do want them to have qualified people who are firefighters and police officers. So in that sense, look at qualifications that actually speak to their ability to do that job well. So be picky in that regard. But you can't afford to choose based on skin pigmentation, based on who they sleep with or don't sleep with, based on, like I said, what's going on in their pants or in their shirts. This is so backward, such a backward way of thinking. And I don't know about you, Nicole. Hi, Nicole. I haven't talked to you yet today.
Hi.
When your house is burning to the ground, is it really important to you whether the person showing up is gay or straight or black or white? Or
I'm blessed to say that hasn't happened to me, but I don't think that would matter.
Knock on wood.
But it's funny to me that this is like they are begging for people to do this profession now, when I know when I got out of school and when I was in college, I had a couple of friends that wanted to be firefighters, and it was hard to get chosen. I mean, they were EMTs first, they were volunteers first. I mean, you had to get an A on every test. I mean, 100%. If you I had one friend that got a 95 and never made the cut. It was so competitive. Right. And now either nobody wants to do it or nobody's good enough in their book to do it. I don't know. It's pretty wild how that table has turned.
Well, then you get the DEI points, right? Yeah. It's like, it's just, that is a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And they say everyone is invited. If you're a white guy, do you feel like a white straight guy? Do you want to walk into that room?
I'm not going to that workshop. And what I mean by that's a recipe for disaster is not that, black people can't do that job or gay people can't do that job. That's not what I mean. It's that you're prioritizing characteristics that don't actually speak to their ability to do the job. Like I said, I take bilingual out of that. I do think that that's a bonus. I don't think it's the end-all be-all. Right, I don't think you have to be bilingual.
Yes.
I think it doesn't hurt, right?
It's a bonus as far as, building your resume. Right. I feel like that's something that can help.
In any industry. Just in life. You learned a second language, good for you.
Yep.
But this stuff is so stupid. And again, it's building, we looked at, for instance, and we talked about this on the show, maybe even before you came, about hiring standards having to be lowered in light of how many people have left police agencies across the country. And isn't that the exact opposite of what these social justice warriors were demanding? Right. Is they want, better police officers better equipped to respond to difficult situations, not so quick to use force, etc. And then you scared so many of the lifelong professionals away who you just crapped on for a few years. And then it's like, there's so few of them, we'll just lower hiring standards. You think that's going to lead to better outcomes on our streets when there's a contact with law enforcement.
They're rushing them in. I mean, I'd like to think that they're not, but it's scary. I mean, every month there's more SPD officers out than there are in.
Yep.
So
it's not working. It's not working. It's going to lead to a police force that is not as well trained, as well equipped for the job. That is what's going to happen. So all of this is so freaking backward. All right, do we want to do a second unbelievable today?
I mean, we can.
Okay, let's do it.
Go for it.
Okay, California is just wild, and this is another example of it. And I had to look into this because I was like, there's just no way that's true. So back in 2021, Governor Newsom signed a piece of legislation, Assembly Bill 1084, and it requires some retail stores in the state to have a gender-neutral section for kids' toys. So regardless of whether they've been traditionally marketed for either boys or girls, there has to be a section that's considered gender-neutral. Mm-hmm. Which to me doesn't make sense, and it kind of goes against this whole like, oh, you don't have to conform to gender stereotypes. Because what toys would you put in gender neutral? Because you're saying, and they want us to believe that, oh, it's okay if boys play with Barbie dolls and stuff, and girls can play with Tonka trucks or whatever it is. Okay, well then don't they become gender neutral? If you take away the gender stereotypes, then aren't all toys just gender neutral?
That's where I think the emphasis is placed on the wrong things, right? So we're saying, oh, if you don't like Barbies, then you might be a boy, so maybe you should live like a boy and change your name, right?
Right.
Where really we're saying what should be said is, oh, you're a girl and you don't like playing with Barbies, like you should try to play with these toy cars, and guess what? That's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? So, but the
and you
kicker
can still
to
be
this,
who you were born to be.
The kicker to this, and I want you to really consider the government doing this to private stores based on nothing but their woke gender ideology. Retail stores with more than 500 employees are going to start to face fines if they don't do this, if they don't have a gender neutral toy section. Think about that. Think about that. That is absolutely insane because, so signed in 2021, it goes into effect coming up here on January 1st. According to ABC 15, in September, a California bill passed allowing judges to consider a parent's, why does that have to, I'm going to read the second one. Keeping similar items that are traditionally marketed for either girls or boys separated makes it more difficult for the consumer to compare the products and incorrectly implies that their use by one gender is inappropriate. Why did you include the quote above that? What is that about?
That's part of this bill and like how they passed it. So the bill, for its purposes and the provision, would include a parent's affirmation of the child's gender. That's in the bill. It doesn't. So it's part of this.
Well, I knew about that one. So that had to do with, we talked about it in California, which is, I think it was bill like.
Oh, sorry. This is the September one, right? So
yeah.
This is all part of an agenda, is what I'm saying.
Oh, gotcha.
So
okay.
it's all part
Nicole,
of this.
You're confusing me here.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So, and this is true that it's an agenda in California. We're seeing it in Washington State as well. So you remember in California, we talked about this controversial bill that basically says if you've got some sort of dispute between parents and they're divorced and looking for custody issues or whatever, if one parent goes by the child's desired sort of gender ideology and the other doesn't, that could be used in court against that parent, like to take them away and to give it to the other parent, which is wild. And so it's all part of that. And then this bill about, so parents, we're going to tell parents how they have to parent their kids and whether they're going to conform with their child regardless of age, their 7-year-old's desired gender. And for toy stores, big toy stores, we're going to tell you how to market your toys to kids. And if you don't have a section that is specific for gender neutral toys, then we're going to fine you. The government is going to fine you. This is wild stuff. I mean, that is we have never seen this level of government overreach that we have seen manifesting, I would say, since the beginning of the pandemic to now. They had all the power during the pandemic. The government overreach there was insane. And it's carrying into all these other areas where the government feels like they have the power to do this. And again, it goes back to one-party rule, right? Two-party system, if you've got actual checks and balances, this kind of stuff never goes through. This kind of stuff would be DOA. But one-party rule allows for them to push through their craziest whims. Oh, that toy store? Toys R Us? Does that even exist anymore? You got to have
I
your
think it's just
gender neutral
online now.
section. And if you don't, we're going to fine you. This is wild. I don't know where it ends. I don't know what the turning point is, but absolutely unbelievable. And what you see in California, we know it's only a matter of time before it comes up here and before we see the same sort of stuff happening here, which I would argue we're already seeing a lot of government exertion into the household.
Right. And doesn't the over 500 employees make this especially targeted at big biz? They're like, oh, we don't like big biz. We're going to make them operate the way that we want them to operate. Because if you actually cared about the kids, then it wouldn't matter how big a company it was, right? If it was about the kids, you would say, hey, we need this for all kids. But you're saying, oh, no, only, Target, Walmart, whatever. I don't know.
But also, and
Toys
again,
R Us, if there is one.
So what they're saying in this bill is that even if it was, regardless of whether they have been traditionally marketed for either boys or girls. So what that tells me is that these stores can just pick a bunch of stuff, even if it's been traditionally marketed to a girl, put it in a section, and they're just going to put gender neutral. So then you're going to make the store kind of decide what a gender neutral toy is, and they're toys that they're not going to create new toys. They're not going to create new toys to put in the gender neutral toy section.
Right. I think that what they're trying to do is ban the colors pink and blue. You can no longer, if
Well,
you
they're
are
not
a
saying
girl,
that.
but that's what they're doing, right? Like it won't look, they want it to look like there's no gender assigned to this aisle. So in the real world, they show examples of Barbie aisles, which are all pink, and, Tonka aisles, which are blue. And so they don't want blue and pink anymore.
Mix them up, or you just mix them up.
You could.
Sell the Barbie
but
next
that's
to the
their
truck.
point, is they want it all to be in one. So girls can see the blue Tonka trucks or the yellow Tonka trucks and the blue Hot Wheels. That's what that would be. But yes, it's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, it is. And if I were Toys R Us, what I would do is I would just take down all the boys and girls signs.
Yeah,
and then if the government wanted to complain, I would be like, oh, are you saying that the pink is for girls only? Are you assuming what kids based on gender want to play with? Like, that's wrong of you, That's what I would do. I'd just take them all down and everything would be gender neutral.
I think what most will do is just continue selling online. Like most people shop anyway.
Wild. This stuff is
silly.
insane.
Never mind the crime, homelessness, drugs, everything else going on in California.
Oh, yeah. Let's focus on this.
Keep passing these laws and making it more difficult for...
That makes it even worse when you really do think about the types of things and the crises that we have. And we're going to see it in Washington State, too. And we'll talk more next week about some of the bills that have been pre-filed, where it's like, that's what you're focused on. Get elected, go to represent your constituents, and this is it. This is what you're giving us. Wild. Okay, we'll dip outside of Washington State, talk about the debate last night, also get to Florida Report. But first, if you are trying to budget before the new year, which I know a lot of households do, we do it in our household, we've been doing it on the podcast as well, you're probably looking for ways to save money, especially given sort of what we've been talking about the state of the economy and what's perhaps to come in 2024. You need insurance. There's no way around that. But why not have it handled by a local company that's been in this business for a long time and that will work proactively to try to get you the best price for the insurance that you need. Mike and I took the First Mark Challenge back in the spring. We are going to be members of the First Mark family for life. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark, and he says, look, we have a wonderful service that we offer, but it is not going to be a situation where you call us and we get you what you need in 15 minutes or less.
How much time did it take for you?
Couple hours.
Okay, so
Total.
all in a couple hours from the time we gather the information, do the presentation, and go through everything. It's a couple hours of time, right? And I would say that's probably on the high end.
Yeah.
Right. It
well,
ranges.
We were chatty. We were very chatty.
We were chatty. Yes, exactly. Anywhere from an hour to 2 hours is the investment in time to find out, and there's no obligation. There's no extra fees if you become a First Mark client. We are paid the same way every other insurance agency in the state of Washington is paid. We're paid by the insurance company that is the writer of your business. And so, there's nothing to lose.
Yeah, nothing to lose, no downside. It's a little time investment to find out if you can save money, if you can get better insurance. That was the case for Mike and I. We have way better insurance than we had previously. We're not spending a penny more. It really is a no-brainer. So take some time, if not now, in the new year, to do the First Mark Challenge. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. They work for you. Okay, dipping outside of Washington State, there was a debate last night. I actually love what they did with the debate. News Nation is trying to obviously make a name for itself. It was a News Nation debate, but they invited Megyn Kelly in. I mean, Megyn Kelly, I think, is most well known and really took off after she moderated a debate, and there was some fireworks between her and former President Donald Trump, and then she went to NBC, and that didn't work out for her, and so now she's independent. But News Nation invited her in for it, which I thought was really, really smart, and she did a good job. I thought overall the debate was one of the better ones that we've seen from the moderators. Still a disaster for the participants, however. But Vivek,
yes.
Vivek seems to be starting to wear on people. Not just his fellow competitors, but I have seen social media turn against him a little bit among a lot of conservatives. And he gets booed. I'll play one clip here, and we'll move on from the debate. I'm so over the debates already. He went after Nikki, and listen to how hard he gets booed for it.
She said that I have a woman problem. Nikki, I don't have a woman problem. You have a corruption problem. And I think that that's what people need to know. Nikki is corrupt. This is a woman who will send your kids to die so she can buy a bigger house. This is the problem. Using identity politics more effectively than Kamala Harris is a form of intellectual fraud.
Haley, would you like to respond?
No, it's not worth my time to respond to him.
Oh, did you cut off the boo? Oh, it was in there.
It was there.
Oh, it was in there a little bit.
There's a lot of boos.
Yeah. But he, Chris Christie had went after him quite a bit. And Chris Christie, I mean, he's not going to be president. I don't know what he's still doing up on stage, but he got a pretty good reception from the crowd when he came to Nikki Haley's defense. That being said, I didn't think it was a particularly strong debate for Nikki Haley. I mean, there's been a lot of headlines going into it about how she's sort of on the upswing and she's got some big donors behind her. And it seems like if this is her moment, she needs to take it. I thought she was fine. I like the way she responded to that. It's not even worth my response. But, Chris Christie had come to her defense and was going after Vivek for basically saying he didn't think Nikki Haley was intelligent. And Chris Christie's like, she's obviously a very intelligent woman. And he got a lot of round of applause. But it sort of, to me, made Nikki Haley look a little weaker, that she needs people on stage, coming to her defense or whatever it is. And that's hard. That is the reality as a woman running for politics and for president.
Yeah, I thought just her facial expressions and stuff made her look a little bit like worn down or something.
A little meek. And sorry if that's me being too critical of a woman for that. It's fine, but that is just the reality. Is you do have to put more effort, I think, into coming across as like strong, confident. She usually does that pretty well. There were some moments last night where I'm like, yeah, you do look like you're getting a little beat down by all of this.
Yeah. And I think Vivek needs to chill. I mean, I think it's actually too late for him to chill. Yes. I think he's already established who he wants to be, and I don't think it's going to be the guy, because if he would have just stayed where he was that first debate, I think people were kind of revved up by him into these debates, and then he got a little excited and went overboard. And now he's looking for the clicks. That is becoming. It began with him having these really actually intellectually interesting arguments, and now he's sort of like, oh, Nikki equals corrupt. Great, okay, fine. I don't even think he wants to be president now.
Well,
he just wants the fame and whatever else is next.
He's not going to be president. No. Okay, just in case we're curious, then I can stop butchering his name inadvertently. All right, it is Thursday. That means it's time to check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State, including, of course, some stories about what Governor Ron DeSantis, yes, he is still governor after all, is up to.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, hello. Lots of Florida news to get to.
Yes, always.
So Ron DeSantis is doing two things that seem a little counterintuitive. So let's start with the first one. He wants to cut 1,000 state jobs. Why?
He's trying to cut the budget, and cutting some jobs is one of the things that he wants to kind of do. But he hasn't really said what those jobs are. In the conference where he kind of announced that he wanted to do this in order to cut I think it's something like $7 billion from the budget or something like that. He talked about cutting 1,000 jobs and then made a little bit more of a point to talk about how he wants to give $1 million to FSU over the team being snubbed from the college championship bowls. I mean, they have a perfect record. So they said that they got snubbed because their star quarterback is out on injury. So they probably won't perform as good as they did throughout the season. But I hate to think he wants to even suggest laying out some taxpayer dollars so that a college football team can sue a committee.
Well, I think it's the optics of it, right? Like, let's cut people's jobs to save money, but then also let's sue over football, which I'm not trying to downplay. People love football, and they're like, FSU belonged in the perfect record, whatever it is. But it's the simultaneous, like, hey, we need to cut jobs. If Inslee did that, oh my gosh, we would have lost it. Cut jobs, but also let's spend a bunch of money suing over the feeling that we got snubbed.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know what jobs, because if there's some useless jobs out there that are, stale enough that DeSantis wants to get rid of them, I might be on board with that. So I would have liked to know what jobs he would like to, get rid of, and then talk about football.
Yeah, let's reserve that for another time for sure. But yeah, I'm all for a lean, mean government. It's just sort of, okay, if we were looking for a lean, mean government, I don't know if suing over a football game is necessarily the best use of resources. Yeah. Speaking of DeSantis, what'd you think about the DeSantis-Newsom debate matchup? We haven't had a chance to talk to you about it yet.
It went down basically as I would have expected it to go down. Slightly funny, slightly useless, and I think it was just kind of a soapbox for both of these guys to stand on and just talk about themselves and talk against each other like they've been doing for years. So it was a little useless in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just interesting that you're right. I mean, it is what we thought it was going to be. I don't think it changes anyone's minds. The only interesting angle to me is Newsom is clearly preparing himself for a presidential appointment, I'm going to say, just replacing Joe Biden, and continues to act like he's not. There's no other reason to do a debate like that.
No, I don't think so either. And DeSantis did try to get him to admit it a couple times, and Newsom would just fight back with being like, "You're behind in your own state," and like,
which is true.
It's true. Ron. It's all true. It was just both of them trying to pry truths out of each other and deflection central. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. One more. There is like kind of the epitome of Florida man is this guy who's got tattoos all over his face, and they call him the Joker.
Yeah, he's like the Florida Joker, they call him.
Yeah, and so he now believes that the newest Grand Theft Auto has modeled a character after him.
Yes, and if you look at the mugshot of him that kind of went viral a few years back, he was arrested for some pretty minor things like marijuana possession, and he had a concealed firearm at the time. But his mugshot went pretty viral as one of the original Florida man news stories. He's got Joker, clown tattoos and words all over his face. And if you watch the latest trailer that was dropped this week for the Grand Theft Auto, it's very much set in Florida, and it looks just like him, in my opinion.
I feel like he should get money for that if they're going to like mimic a character off of him. Not that I want a criminal to benefit from his weird face tattoos, but
no. And that's kind of what this news story is about, is he kind of put out a TikTok like, Rockstar Games, you need to get at me about this. Like and a lot of people were saying like he should get his check. But a while ago during a different Grand Theft Auto, I think an LA one, there was a Lindsay Lohan lookalike, and she actually did take Rockstar Games to court over it, and the case was dismissed because the judge was like, this is just a generic version of a beach girl, and just because you think she looks like you doesn't mean it is you. So I don't know if this guy will get any money out of it. Maybe a few TikTok followers, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hey, maybe I should get some face tattoos, get out there on social media. I don't know what I'd get. So a neck tattoo, That's when you've really made it. Neck tattoo, a couple teardrops. All right, Miranda, thank you so much.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
What would you get, Nicole, if you got a neck tattoo? Thug life. I would get a giant portrait of my dog. Right there.
Oh, that would be adorable.
I'd look at her cute little face every time I looked in the mirror.
Yeah, if I got a neck tattoo, I'd probably just tattoo on a necklace because, I like to wear a necklace.
You do like your necklaces.
Looks better with I think my neck looks better with a necklace, and sometimes, you can't wear it when you swim, can't wear it because I don't know.
Permanent necklace. I mean, people do tattoo on rings.
Right.
So
that's
necklace,
probably what I do.
Why not?
It would look natural. You probably wouldn't regret it. I get tired of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll find a reason we'll start some sort of bet. Loser gets a neck tattoo. I haven't figured out what it is yet. But
did I tell you, did I say this on air, but I almost got a tattoo when I went to Costa Rica? I was on the table.
But the guy was like,
he
sassy
drew it
with you, right?
Yeah, he drew it, and I didn't love the way he drew it. And I asked him to do something different, and he got kind of sassy and offended by my asking him to change it. And I was like, I'm out.
And you don't have any tattoos?
Nope.
Huh. Oh, well,
yeah, almost.
Nicole, I don't blame you for that. I do not blame you for that. Okay, we're going to get to our daily subscriber poll question coming up next, and I'll explain the genesis for it because it has to do with something that's going to be debated in Olympia this upcoming legislative session. But as you know, the struggle real right now for mom and pop landlords. Seattle has some really strict tenant protection laws that are making it very difficult. We hear the horror stories on the news all the time. And now Tacoma has passed Measure 1, which is really leaving small landlords to figure out, hey, do I sell? Do I stay? Do I wait and see? Wes Jones of sellwithwes.com, he actually, we found out, is a small mom and pop landlord in the city of Tacoma. And so he's dealing with this right now in a very real way, deciding, does he want to sell some of his properties and stay and wait it out? And he said that this is only going to get worse and worse as more of these municipalities go this route.
We continue to see more and more aggressive landlord-tenant laws being passed in favor of the tenant rights. Like you go down to Tacoma, we are practically back at those, COVID anti-eviction restrictions with what they have passed down there. If you really want to jump through the hoops and work the system, except what's not available right now is the help for landlords should one of those people choose not to pay. And I'm saying choose not to pay because there are plenty of people who are choosing not to pay. It's not that they can't, they choose not to.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key here. There are going to be tenants that fall on tough times that really do need assistance. And small landlords don't want to kick out, mom and her kids on the street. And so that narrative is just unfair. But anyway, if you are a small landlord in Seattle or Tacoma or elsewhere, and you're really not sure how to manage the situation, do you want to sell? Reach out to our friend Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com. Not only can he help you go through with it if you decide to put your properties on the market, but he's going through it himself. And so he certainly has a little bit of insight into the situation. Sellwithwes.com. A better way to sell your home, and we appreciate his expertise on that issue as well, because it was helpful for us to understand from that perspective what's going on. Okay, our daily subscriber show poll today has to do with this issue of media literacy, which we talked about on the show previously. The question I asked subscribers on Patreon and locals, should public high school students be taught media literacy in Washington state, yes or no? The genesis of this is because we're going to discuss it on the show next week, so I want to know your opinion on it going into that conversation. Remember we talked about how California is doing this, wants to do this, how the governor in New York was directing her agencies to teach kids media literacy, help them navigate this social media world and disinformation and misinformation, and I said, that sounds crazy. That sounds crazy to have the government, regardless if you're a Republican or a Democrat, coming up with a curriculum to teach kids how to navigate media and decide what's true and what's false. That sounds like a recipe for disaster and a recipe toward directing them at propaganda outlets that they prefer. And so right now, most of you are saying, and the reason I brought it up is because this is going to be discussed in Olympia this legislative session. We're already starting to see the pre-discussions about it. Remember, I told you California wants to do it, only a matter of time before we're going to do it. And so this is something that some Democrats in Washington state want to do. And we're going to get more information on, okay, what would that curriculum look like? Who would be teaching it? How would it be monitored? Because with some of these activist teachers, can you imagine one of those activist teachers teaching kids about what news outlets to trust? That's just another cog in the indoctrination machine. A lot of you are saying no, which I was surprised. 25% right now are saying yes, and I'm assuming you think that depends on the curriculum. Edward, where'd your comment go, Edward? I think basic literacy should be in school and maybe college for media literacy. Yeah, I mean, school is about literacy, right? Making sure that you don't graduate a bunch of illiterates. But yeah, maybe media literacy is better left for college when it's an elective. That sounds more reasonable to me. Kirk says yes, but it has to be done in a completely unbiased way, since that is likely not possible in most school districts and definitely not possible in the school system I live in. I am suspect at best. Because we've seen that school districts have proven incapable of controlling activist teachers who want to go off script. We've had stories about that, like what's happening down in Olympia, some sex ed lessons. We talked about the teacher at the Seattle Middle School who had her kids read this strange, sexually explicit thing. Did we ever hear back from the school district about that? I can't remember.
No, I mean, she's still employed. I know that.
Just wild. So it's not so much that I think the curriculum for media literacy would be inherently biased, but I think how it's carried out has the potential to be very, very biased.
Well, I think
and that's what worries me.
It takes about one day, maybe less than an hour, to say, hey, look deeper. Don't believe every headline you read.
Right.
And do your own research.
Yeah. What else would that curriculum entail? Weiscastle says on Locals, prove that public schools can successfully handle reading, writing, and arithmetic, then ask me if I'm okay with teaching media literacy. Exactly. The track record's not great. So I don't know. And that's also, by the way, Republicans are proposing this bill that would improve Holocaust education and maybe even talk about the 70-year history of the dispute between Israel and Palestine. I'm suspect of that as well. I think Senator John Braun was on the show to talk about that. And it's something I brought up to him is I'm not sure that I want that curriculum in the hands of these activist teachers who are supporting kids' walkouts in support of Hamas, quote unquote. So adding anything on top of the basics seems like a lift that our state's public education system is just not equipped to make at this current time.
It's proven they can't handle. I think that it's a reminder. All of these are reminders that just because you send your kid off to school doesn't mean you shouldn't teach them all of these basic things. I think that you have to make them aware. They might be taught one side or the other. They need to be aware of not only media literacy, but how they're interpreting another human's message.
Biases. It's almost like parents just have to teach their kids educational literacy. Hey, here's how the system might try to influence your way of thinking. It's just about teaching your kid and allowing your kid to be an independent thinker. Right?
Exactly.
My dad, and both my mom and my dad, but my dad was particular, he was like a constitutionalist, and he was very much about teaching us to question everything that anyone in authority told us. That's probably why I turned into a journalist, to be honest. He was a little too, I'm anti-government, anti-bad big government, but he was like just anti-government. I don't know if he ever paid taxes. I hope that never. I have this great picture of him I posted on social media once. It was during his birthday. It was like in the 1980s sometime, I think before us kids were born. Yeah, his shirt said, I make my, or something.
I bet I can
find the IRS, we make our money the old-fashioned way, we steal it, or something like that. I was like, wow, that really, see if you can find that. That really sums up my dad. Let's see, Dan says, depends on what you mean by media literacy. If you mean learning how politicians use statistics to lie and journalists write biased stories, should be part of grade school education somewhere. So what we'll do is we'll get more information on what they're proposing for media literacy, and we'll come back with that next week, and then you can decide sort of, is it something that you're okay with? But I tend to agree with, for instance, what Weiscastle said. Man, you guys aren't even getting the basics right. I'm not sure that we want to add anything into that equation. All right, some questions and comments from the live stream on Dems and millionaires and billionaires. Mary Christie says, they did this to Tim Eyman for years, vilified him, and then ruined him. Literally ruined him. Used the Attorney General's office to ruin his life. Samantha Olson, this is our life in San Juan County, referring to this light sentence for the individual convicted of controlled substance homicide. Our cops aren't allowed to do anything, and if they do, judges don't give any consequences. On our interview with the San Juan County Sheriff, Cheryl Reed says, the dealer may or may not be sorry, but to tell on their dealer, I could easily speculate that they would fear to receive a beating or death for such betrayal. That is true. Could it be that this person, the drug cartel will kill you. He'll cut your head off, And so maybe they were just like, hey, I'm only going to get 2 years. That's not worth it to snitch on, my dealer who might, get in trouble with their dealer. So I can understand that too. Don't commit a crime in the first place. Do you have the picture of my dad? Oh, there it is. I can't see it from here. Can you read it?
It does say, IRS, we make money the old-fashioned way. We steal it.
If you ever wanted to know why I am the way that I am, that's a picture of my dad celebrating his birthday with an old American flag cake.
His birthday has an American flag and then the IRS shirt. I love it.
Like I said, is there any better representation of why I am the way I am? And then my mom gave me the sensibilities to stay grounded. Like I had to get enough of my mother to be a functioning adult in society. Yeah, that's a great picture. I love that picture of my dad. Okay, Y says the sheriff sounded so fed up and exhausted. It really sucks to be a police officer because damned if you do, damned if you don't do, damned if you do. Yeah, and he did sound a little like, this is just ridiculous. But I agree with his sentiment that you've got to speak up and share what's happening. I mean, how often do we talk about criminal justice issues in San Juan County? We don't. And I think there's a lot of counties experiencing this sort of stuff where they only hear about what's happening in Seattle, in King County, in Pierce County, in Snohomish County. And so it doesn't maybe seem as like it impacts their life personally in the way that it probably is if you only heard about the stories. Let me see. Natalie Bagby says, absolutely not. As against drugs as I am, the person who sold the drugs did not force the person to use them, did not force that person to use so much that they OD'd. It would be different if the dealer had laced something into the drugs and hid that and it led to an OD. That would be like saying a car dealer who sold someone a car is responsible for what that person does with the car if they drove it off a cliff or killed someone with it. Drug dealers should be held accountable for selling drugs, but not what someone else chooses to do with those drugs after a purchase. I disagree with the comparison because selling someone a car isn't illegal and selling someone drugs is inherently illegal. And you know that the drugs, regardless of what it is, has the potential, unless it's like weed or something, has the potential to kill that person. It's like, I think Washington State has this law. I know in the Midwest we did. If a parent gives a minor alcohol and then they drink themselves to death, the parent's responsible for that. I'm assuming in Washington State there's some sort of culpability law. We had it in the Midwest.
I think it's a supplying minors.
Right. And so you're doing something that you know could reasonably result in that person's death. So I can't look at it the same way as, selling someone a used car. King County Fire recruiting based on skin color and sexual orientation. Everett Phillips says it's not a qualification for the job. It's a drive to expand the demographic that applies for the job. Yeah, and that's a good point, and I can see that. But also, to Nicole's point, you need more firefighters. You need more police officers. So why are you wasting government resources hiring events specific to people of color, specific to LGBTQ people, specific to women? Just have recruiting drives where people who want to do that job can come, because as Nicole said, I bet a white guy's not going to that. It's like, well, they don't want me there. And then it's a turnoff to even apply, because you see it where they're prioritizing their resources. So I definitely understand the point that you're making. But at the same time, we're in a situation where beggars can't be choosers, and we should just be actively recruiting everyone who's interested in that field. And then from there, moving forward and figuring out who's the best qualified. On gender neutral toys, there was a lot of suggestions from you guys in the comments about what that gender neutral toy section could be. Somebody said just put gender neutral toys on the puzzle section.
Right.
That's a gender neutral toy, right? Brianne Ledbetter says, I played with cars all the time with my little brother, and he played with my toys, and neither of us turned out to be trans. Yeah, I mean, I have this great, I wish I could find it. My little brother would be mortified. My mom got him dinosaurs one year for Christmas. I think they were probably like yay big. Dinosaur toys. He took off screaming. He was probably 6.
Because he didn't want them?
They were so scary. Because they kind of made this little rah noise. I want to say that was like around the time of Jurassic Park, and so everything was very popular. And my mom or my sister pushed the button. It was like rah, and he's like, high-pitched scream, hightailed it, never did play with those toys.
That's cute.
Meanwhile, us girls were sitting there like, those are cool. So maybe that was a toy meant for a boy that the girls preferred.
Or maybe it was just a toy meant for a kid.
Yeah, or maybe the government should mind its freaking business.
Meant for kids.
Yes.
Whoever wants to play with them.
Just wild. Okay, we're going to get to our closing sanity check momentarily about this awesome sentence that a judge handed down in Ohio to a woman who lost it on some staffers at Chipotle. But first, every week at this time, we talk to Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital about some of the economic news that's out there, trying to understand it, trying to understand where the economy is going, and most importantly, giving you ways to try to manage your personal risk. I mean, as I've said before, we all work very, very hard for the money that we have. We're trying to invest it so we can one day, hopefully, enjoy retirement, and you don't want to lose it if the economy takes a slide next year. One of the stories that's been out there is about what's happening in the commercial real estate market. You know, vacancies and interest rates, and a belief that that market is going to go south in a hurry. And what does that mean for us as you see those headlines? So I asked Zach Abraham to come on and talk about it. So I was joking with you before we started the show today, because as usual, something you talked about weeks ago, the mainstream media is finally catching up with. This is the article from Forbes. Economist who predicted 2008 housing crash says commercial real estate bubble is about to burst. So do you agree? And what does that mean?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for about a year. They cannot finance these these buildings at the same price they were financed in 2018, because if you do that, then you look at less demand for specifically office space. And I think we need to delineate here. I think anything that's interest rate sensitive is going to have a tough time, meaning it'll probably have downward pressure. Commercial office space is the worst because it's getting hit on both sides. You've got work from home. There's just pure and simple. There's just less demand structurally than there was prior to COVID. And then you add on top of that interest rate increases. And what we said a year ago when we got a lot of pushback was, we go, look, a lot of these commercial office space buildings are going to be looking at 60 to 70% write downs. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. That's so hyperbolic. And now it's happening. We've seen it happen multiple times. Why? Because that's how much you have to write down the value of the property in order for it to be cash flow positive. And is this in and of itself an economic tidal wave heading toward us? No, but it's just another, it's another board leaning up against the total economic picture, right? It's just another pressure. And, that's one of the reasons that we're just kind of looking at this market and looking at all these people talking about a great economy. And it's not that it's so bad, but there's just so many structural issues coming to a head at one time. And the market is clearly not paying attention. Mainstream media is clearly not paying attention. And I think it's kind of part and parcel to us as a culture now. Why does everybody feel confident about the economy? There's one reason. It's the stock market. And that's all anybody's looking at, right? And you're just like, okay, well, just so you guys know, the prices you're seeing in the stock market are ridiculous.
So when you say earlier that this will be sort of regional, I mean, if we look at Seattle, we've got a lot of tech in the area. There was a lot of work from home allowances. So is that going to factor in? Are we going to see that here regionally?
Yeah, I don't really see a way around it. I mean, if you look at, and for people around the country, they may not be as familiar with this, but Bellevue, right? For those people that don't know, Bellevue is like an affluent suburb right out of Seattle, about 20 minutes outside of Seattle, right? And last I looked, Bellevue had over 1 million square feet of vacant office space, over 1 million. Okay, so yeah, if this does not improve, I don't see how you get around it. Meaning, there's just, when you're talking about 1 million square feet, it's not as simple as making a nice offer to get the mom and pop joint to, take up 5 offices on the 4th floor, right? This is a lot bigger. And so what you need to do is you need to look at the principal value that those things were valued at the last time they got financed, and you need to write it way down. And somebody has to eat that. And who eats that is the bank that financed it, and the shareholders of that bank. And the thing about it to me, and again, I don't want people to walk away like there's a Chicken Little thing. What I'm trying to say is, look, you're going to see defaults. Just book it. And you're going to see more defaults than people know. It's just simple math. Where it gets interesting is if how many of these other pressures come to bear, right? Like the other pressures that the economy is under, right? None of these pressures are good or healthy for the economy. And like I said, it's a really strange environment because everybody's looking at market prices in the stock market, which has nothing to, virtually nothing to do with commercial real estate. And they're all, oh, things are great. Things are great. And you're like, but they're not. there's serious issues here.
Yeah, and I think paying attention to those things is what's important. You know, as you alluded to earlier, it's just sort of added to the row of dominoes of what's happening in our economy and what's to come. And people need to be aware of that to manage their risk, especially related to their retirement. So we appreciate it as always, Zach.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being on.
Yeah, if you want to hear more advice from Zach Abraham about what's happening in the economy, how to interpret it, and what it means for your risk, knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. He's got a weekly radio show, and you can learn more about Bulwark Capital Management's investment strategy, how they're protecting people's portfolios from risk as we speak. Okay, let's get to our closing sanity check, shall we? All right, this is an awesome story out of Ohio. So there's so many of these videos out there of people losing their you-know-what on fast food workers. I see them all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what ends up happening to these people? So there's a woman, this is from Fox 8 in Ohio, woman who threw Chipotle order at worker can work off jail time at fast food restaurant. So this woman loses her mind on a Chipotle employee, sends the food hurling back at him. Total Karen moment. Well, Judge Timothy Gilligan, who's a Parma Municipal Court judge, ends up giving this 39-year-old, and that's even worse, 39, losing your mind like that. Rosemary Hain is her name. Ends up giving her a choice when she gets convicted of 1 count of assault. He says... First of all,
great quote.
This quote, this judge, I want to be my best friend. The quote to this Rosemary girl, you didn't get your burrito bowl the way you like it, and this is how you respond. This is not Real Housewives of Parma. This behavior's not acceptable. So he goes on to say, I thought, why should the city taxpayers pay for her and feed her for 90 days in jail if I can teach her a sense of empathy? And so the question he asked her is, so the employee she assaulted, her last name was Russell, so just keep that in mind, this quote. He said, do you want to walk in Russell's shoes for 2 months and learn how people should treat people? Or do you want to do your jail time? And Rosemary Hain responded, I'd like to walk in her shoes. So that is going to be the sentence, is that for 2 months, instead of spending it in jail, she is going to have to prove gainful employment at a fast food restaurant.
Minimum 20 hours.
Minimum 20 hours a week.
I like it.
I really like it. And learn some freaking empathy and sanity. All right, that has been it for today's episode of Undivided. If you take one thing away from today's episode, I want you to take this away. It is
I'm a very well-paid
only
guy.
okay to be rich if you're a progressive.
I'm a very well-paid guy.
Not like me, dude.
Wait.
Not like me.
Right now, I pay...
Stuart, you are not rich. I am rich. I am rich. I am rich.
I am rich. That has been it for today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. If you have not signed up to support the show already, please do so. undividedpod.com, because I am not rich. And neither is Nicole. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com, just $5 a month.